47b. Finished a bunch of statements about qualities that ended and what the result was, qualities that were extended, but the so Yossi ben Yoezer, the second last line on 47. When Yossi ben Yoezer died, so the Mishnah said that Pasku Eshkol, the Eshkolos ceased. Eshkolos are bunches or clusters of fruit, but my Eshkolos, it's being used as a metaphor? What does it mean? I'm reading them. Shmuel Ish Hakol Bo. It means it's interpretation of the word based on the sound of the word. Eshkol is like Ish Kol, Isha Kol Bo, a man who has everything. In other words, all the good qualities. So referring to, a tzaddik or a Talmud Chacham or something. So, in other words, once Yossi ben Yoezer passed, that was the last of the great people. Yochanan Kohen Gadol Hefer Hodayas Hamaser. The Mishnah said that Yochanan Kohen Gadol, he ended the when every third year when the farmers brought their Maser Sheni to Yerushalayim to consume it there was a vidui maser. There was this confession that they had to make, which said in part, lo achalti bioni mimenu lo biarti mimenu tamei. Like, I didn't misuse the maser. I didn't make it tamei. I didn't eat it when I was not permitted to. Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. My tama. So why did he end this? Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Because people weren't doing it right. They weren't giving the maser. The Torah says give maser, like the first maser is to the Levi, right? But people were giving them to Kohanim instead. Now a Kohen is a subset of Leviim, but they're supposed to receive Truma, and a regular Levi is supposed to leave Levi. So all right, so the Gemara says, so in other words, like, stop giving it all together if you're going to give it to the wrong people. Below de ashar masros. Okay, so that's Maser Rishon. That's the first 10% that you're supposed to give to the Levi. What about Maser Sheni and Maser Ani? Right, there's two other tithes. One is in alternate in different years of the 7-year cycle. One is Maser Sheni, which you consume yourself, but must be consumed in Yerushalayim, and the other is Maser Ani, which is given to the poor. So they weren't giving that to the Kohanim, presumably. Rish Lakish. No, there's a linkage. If you don't do your vidu, if you don't do your declaration about your Maser Rishon, then you don't. You also don't do the rule is, if you're not doing the Maser Rishon that you give to the Levi, if you're not doing the vidui on that, then don't do the vidui on the other Masros either. So if you abolish the first one, then there's no link anymore, or there's no. There's nothing to link it to. My Talmud, why was the reason for this rule? Because when the Torah talks about this declaration over the Maser, it starts talking about Maser Rishon, implying that it all depends on, like, all the viduis depend on the first vidui, on the vidui of Maser Rishon. Okay. So once you abolish the first one, then you're destroying the basis for all the other ones too. So it sounds like that people would still do the Maser Rishon, they would still do the Maser, but give it to the wrong person, right? Instead of giving it to the Levi, they give it to the Kohen. But we have another brisa. Afu bitul savidui, also referring to Yochanan ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol, who abolished the Maser confession, the vidui. V'gazar ala demai. He also made the decree about demai, right? That we discussed the other day. That originally, if you had produce that you didn't know if Maser was taken from it or not, Truman Maser was taken from it or not, you would inquire. Say, you'd go to the seller or the farmer or whatever and say, hey, did you give your tithes from this? And if not, then you had to do the tithe yourself. But if you did, then it was okay. But then at some point, Well, here the Gemara describes it. What happens? The Lefi Shalach b'chol Yisrael. So he investigated, in the whole country. Baraj and Mafrishin el Truma Gadol Bavad, and he found out that what people are still giving Truma, the tithe to the Kohen, but they're not giving Maser to the Levi at all. Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni, Miksasan, Maasrim, Miksasan, and Maasrim. What about? Sorry, not that they weren't giving it all, but some people would give the other Maseros and some would not. Amalam. So he said, Banai bo va'omer lachem, kashem shetruma gadol yesh avon misa, kach trumas maser b'tefla yesh avon misa. You know what? This is a serious problem because, look, why are people giving truma? Because truma, the Torah warns, if you don't give truma, the punishment is death, right? You'll be killed by, it's a heavenly punishment, not a court. The court doesn't put you to death, but you're threatened with early death by God. But so that's probably why people are still giving the truma. But you know what? In the maser that you give to the Levi, right? The Levi has to separate a tenth of that to the Kohen. It's also truma. It's called trumas maser, right? Truma taken from maser. And you know what? That has the same punishment. You got the same risk. And people are not giving their maser. If anyone's not giving their maser, then you've got the same level of culpability as for not giving truma. And yet people are not giving maser. So Amavishkin so he said, what we have to do now? If you buy produce from someone who's not who's not a learned person, or who is of the class of people who are suspected now of not giving the tithes at all, Mafrishlan, man, Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni, you, the buyer, have to take out the master. In other words, it doesn't work anymore to inquire from someone, does this farmer or where you got this, do they separate, the tithes? Because maybe they separate truma only, but it's likely that they didn't separate the maser, and therefore it doesn't even help to inquire if they tithe, right? Because their tithes are incomplete. So rather than inquire about it, everybody has to, if you have something that it's unknown where it came from, you have to go ahead and separate the tithes anyway, yourself. Maser Rishon, Maser, and then you do the whole procedure from the Maser Rishon for the Levi that you separate on behalf of the Levi. You have to separate from that a tenth for the Kohen, B'nosel Kohen, the Maser Sheni, Olav Yelcher Yerushalayim, and treat Maser Sheni as it's supposed to be treated, meaning consume it in Yerushalayim. Maser Rishon, Maser Ani, and the other Maser, for the Levi and for the poor. That's different because there, no one can claim it from you. Sure, remember there's some doubt here. So the reason we're giving truma is that it's a serious offense, right? So you don't want to put yourself in that position. The reason we're doing maser sheni is it's still yours, right? You have this produce and you have a responsibility. At least it's a possibility that you have a responsibility to Yerushalayim, so you should do that. But what about what is owed to the Levi or the ani? Well, they can't prove it either. You have no proof that it was that maser was taken from it, but they have no proof that maser wasn't taken from it. It's all a doubtful situation. So in that case, let it rest with, possession is 9/10 of the law, right? Whoever has it gets to keep it. And there's it's like truma, you're not allowed to eat if you're not a Kohen. But Maser Rishon as property, it belongs to the Levi, but anybody can eat it. He can invite you for a meal. He can give it to you and you can eat it. It doesn't have the sanctity of truma. So you can keep it. So Tartita. So anyway, the point is so the Yochanan Kohen Gadol, he said you don't have to do so what was it? Did he think that people were not giving the maser at all? 1 second. So his first statement was the first statement was, why we don't give Maser Sheni and Maser Rishon or why we don't do the Vidui. The implication was that people were giving it, just they weren't there was no longer a reason to do vidui maser rishon maser ani, because the vidui was linked to the vidui of maser rishon, right? But this latter statement, we're saying that no, it's not that people were giving it and there's no need to do vidui. It sounds like he suspected people of not doing the tithes at all. So Master started talking. He had two separate things that he said. Bitul vidui de chaverim, v'gazral demai shalami aretz. There's two classes of people. Remember, there's people who are not suspected, people who are from farmers, and we trust, we believe that they're giving their maser and that they're giving their tithes. And then there's another class of people called the Amei Haaretz who are suspected. So in the case of people who are not suspected, the reason for not doing the bidui is, well, people aren't giving, the Maser Rishon properly. And so there's no bidui, and so there's a link. But in the case of the Amei Haaretz, the reason is that they're suspected of not giving the tithes at all. Okay. Next thing, the Mishnah, V'afu biton sama'orim. The same Yochanan Kohen Gadol also canceled the wakers and also the Ma'orim and the Nokfim, the wakers and the knockers. Who are these people? My Ma'orim. Who are the wakers? Amarachma. Every day where the Levim got up on the stage in the temple to sing, they would say, "Wake up, God! Why are you sleeping?" Amarlan, Yochanan said to them, like, what kind of saying is that? God doesn't sleep. The verse says the guardian of Israel will not sleep or slumber. Ella, so how do you explain Ura Lamatish Hashem? Why are you sleeping, God? What does it mean? When the people of Israel are suffering and everyone else is living a good life. So Lakach Nemar Ura Lamatish Hashem. It's like, it's not literally sleep. It's like God appears to be ignoring us, right? He appears to us to be asleep. So it's kind of blasphemous to say God is sleeping, but in the metaphorical sense, obviously it means that, God, where's your protection? Why aren't you paying attention to us? So when the Levim were, performing their service in the temple, presumably it's a time when Israel is, living independently in its own land. And they have a temple, they have independence. So it's inappropriate to say God is sleeping, because that's not a time when God appears to be sleeping. So that's why it wasn't because you can't use that metaphor. It's because the metaphor is not appropriate when times are good. And the Nokfim, what are the knockers? My Nokfim, Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel, Shahayu Mesartin La'egal Ben Karnav. They would Kadesh Yipol Dam Be'inav. People who brought a calf for a sacrifice to the temple, they would make a cut in between its horns so that blood would drip into its eyes, and it would interfere with its vision. It would make it easier for them to do the shechita, for the cow to be slaughtered. Also, Yochanan Gadol says this is not a good idea. Let's not do this anymore. Mishum demechse kimuma, because it looks like they're putting a blemish in it. As you know, a certain kinds of blemishes in the animal disqualify it from being a sacrifice. Now, this isn't one of them, but it doesn't look good. It looks like something, and then people will get the wrong idea that you can bring sacrifices from blemished animals, even the wrong kind of blemish. Another brisa, it's taught as follows. What does it mean, the knockers? Not that they would cut it to get blood into its eyes, but they would beat it with sticks, which is how the idolatrous sacrifices were done. They'd beat the animal till it collapsed, and then they would sacrifice it. And that's also not good. Yochanan Kohen Gadol said to them, like, when you beat the animal to the point where it collapses, you're making it's almost dead, right? It will no longer If it were dead, it wouldn't be a valid sacrifice. So Gemara says, "Nevela sashachilu." Wait, what do you mean it's dead? It wasn't dead, right? They beat it till it fell down, and then they slaughtered it, but it was still alive. So what's the problem? Ela trefa. So it didn't mean nevela. It didn't mean sacrificing dead animals or animals that had died other than through the shlita. He meant animals that were trefa, which means that they were no longer viable, right? This animal, you'd beaten it half to death. It's now it's not a healthy animal, and therefore it's not valid as a sacrifice. Shemanikov krum shalma, because like maybe you beat it so badly that that the wounds were fatal, even though it's still it's mortally wounded, even though it's still alive, and then it's not valid as a sacrifice. So that's why he canceled this practice. Tabos bakarka. So what did he do? People still, they had to slaughter these animals, and you can imagine it's a kind of chaotic scene in the temple. The animals were probably pretty spooked, and it wasn't so easy to get them to be still so you could slaughter them. So he put rings on the ground, so that to be able to hold the animal steady, either you put the animal's head through the ring, or maybe it was tied to the ring or something, but there was another way to keep the animals calm, or at least somewhat immobilized, so you could do the shlita, and you didn't have to beat them half to death or cut them to get blood in their eyes. And until his days, again, same Yochanan Kohen Gadol, until his days, they would bang the hammer in Yerushalayim. What does that mean? In other words, no smiths would be working on Chol Hamoed. Until his time, people would be working, and he said, like, no more work on Chol Hamoed. And all of his day, during his time, until he made this decree, people didn't have to ask about Demai. You had to take it anyway, Kedamar. And as we said before, that people stopped giving the tithes, or they were suspected of not giving the tithes. So he said, you know what? Don't even ask if they give the tithes, because you might get the answer about the wrong kind, but they didn't do all the tithes, like we said before. So, like, just take the tithe yourself if you suspect the grower. Okay, next Mishnah. Mishabat Sanhedrin, when the Sanhedrin was stopped working, or disbanded, Batal Hashiri Beis Hamishtos, there was no more singing at parties. Shenemar Bashir Lo Yishtu Yain. It's the verse in Yeshayahu says that they won't drink wine while singing, and the Gemara will discuss, what does this have to do with the Mishabat La Sanhedrin? Gemara will get to that. Misha Mesim Nevim Arishanim, when the early prophets died, that's the Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Chizkiyahu, once they passed, Batlu Urim V'Tumim, the Urim V'Tumim stopped. This was the kind of magical way that they consulted God on important questions. Mishachar Beis Hamikdash, when the temple was destroyed, Batal Hashamir v'Nofas Sufim. The Shamir and the Nofas Sufim stopped. You couldn't find them anymore. The Shamir is the Gemara will discuss this, but the Shamir is this like magical worm that they would use to cut stone without having to use metal tools. And the Nofas Sufim we'll also see in the Gemara. I don't know if we got up to this in today's Gemara or not. So we will find out what that is when we get there. Upasku Anshe Amanim Yisrael, and there were no more people of faith. Shenemar Hoshi Hashem Ki Gamar Chasid Avad Mibnei Adam. Save us, God, because there are no more faithful people among us. Shimon Gamliel Omer, hey Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said that Rabbi Yoshua gave testimony. Miyom Shachar Beis Hamikdash, from the day the temple was destroyed. Ein Yom Shein Bo Kala, every day has a curse in it. Oliyar Tal Lebracha, and there's no dew that no dew with a positive effect, or with a bracha. Nitel Tam HaPeros, and fruit doesn't taste as good as it used to. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Af Nitel Shuman HaPeros, and fruit isn't as fat as juicy as it used to be. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Atara Notlas Atami Asareach. Since there's no more, like without the temple, you can't make tame things tahor, and so everything is tame, and it that reduces the smell and the taste of the fruit. Hamasros nachlos as shuman hadagan. Once we stopped doing maser, the grain wasn't as juicy or as healthy as full as it was before. People who started to practice more prostitution and magic, that brought an end to everything. So unclear what everything means, but presumably we're talking about the produce. So it's like all of these things, like every type of produce, the quality declined once once prostitution and magic became so common. We might be So we quoted a verse in the Mishnah trying to prove that there was no more singing at parties, had coincided with or was a result of no longer having a Sanhedrin. Like, what does that verse have to do with Sanhedrin? Because another verse says the elders are no longer at the gate, which is, the gate was where the Sanhedrin, the court sat. For example, when in the book of Ruth, when Boaz wanted to convene a court, he went to the gate where the judges would sit, like the entrance to the city, I guess. And then the same pasuk refers to Bachurim Milginosam, the young men will no longer be singing. So when there's no Sanhedrin, there's no singing. Amarav Udna Deshama Zimra Teyakar, an ear that listens to music should be torn off. Amarava Zimra de Bevesa Churba Besipa. Music in a house will bring churban, will bring destruction. This is, after the temple is destroyed and you're not supposed to sing anymore. Shanamar Kol Yisharer Bachalon Charev Basaf Ki Arza Era. A voice will sing out in the window, and destruction will be at the doorway, because the cedar work is a city. Mikey Azra Ki Arza Era. What does that last phrase mean? The cedar work is a city. Rav Yitzchak Bayis Hamasubach Barazim Irhu. Is a house that is surrounded by cedar trees. Is that as strong as a city, like a walled city? No. Even a house that is, protected by a forest of trees, it will still be destroyed if there's music and song. When destruction begins, Besipa Maschil, it starts at the doorway. Shenamar Farav Basaf, destruction at the doorway or the threshold of the house. Or you have another source. Ushiya Yukas Shar, from desertion the gate is stricken. Amar Marbar Avashi Ladidi Chazile. I once saw, it's implied, a shade, a demon working on a house. Umenaga Kitara, and he was goring at it like a bull. Okay, so in other words, just talking about watching the destruction of a house due to evil forces. Not clear what that's about. Amar Ravina says Zimra denagde udevakare shari. So we said that after the temple is destroyed, no more singing at parties. But Ravina says music of, like, the people working on ships or people who are plowing is permitted. It's not at a party. The gardoi asir, but music of people who are weaving, that's forbidden. Presumably there is a distinction here being made of, like when you're rowing a boat, you've got you want everybody to row in unison, you need a rhythm. So that's possibly the purpose of the song. It's not for frivolous purposes, it's for work purposes. And perhaps the same is true in the in agriculture. Famously, there were a lot of work songs. I'm thinking of the of slaves and black slaves and black slaves in the South. There's a lot of music associated with that. So they were not singing because they were having a good time. They're singing to somehow contributes to their efforts at working. But weavers, they sing apparently just because they're happy, because they like to sing. And that's, that is frowned upon after the destruction of the temple. Rav Huna Batil Zimra. Rav Huna said, no more music. Kamea avaze bezuza. So, what happened was the prices went down. The value of 100 geese became one zuz, which is not a lot. And 100 bushels of wheat were also a zuz, so prices were very cheap. But even so, no one would buy any. Asa Rav Chisda Zalzel, based Rav Chisda, he kind of made fun of Rav Huna. Ibai avza bezuza v'lo mishtakaf, and then, then things got worse. In other words, when Rav Huna made this decree, prices went down. Now, I don't know how the farmers made a living, but that's not what we're focusing on. We're focusing on the consumer, right? Things got good for the consumer because of this decree. And then Rav Chisda made fun of this decree, and what happened? Prices went up so much that you couldn't even buy one goose for a zuz or one bushel of wheat for a zuz. Amar Rav Yosef, Zamre Gavre va'ane Nashe. Prisusa. If you have a chorus where men sing and women respond, that's prisusa. That's licentious. Zamre Nashe va'ani Gavre. If the women sing and the men respond, ke'esh b'na'aras. That's like a fire in flags. What's the difference between prisusa, between licentiousness and this fire? Like either way, you shouldn't do it, right? So he's saying, you know which one you should get rid of first, the one that's worse, right? But really, you should get rid of all of these choruses. But the one that's worse is the one where the women sing and the men respond. If you drink wine while you're listening to these four kinds of music, maybe chamesh barani yisrael, if you bring 5 kinds of punishment to the world. Shnema, mashkime baboker shechar yirdofu. Me'acharei banashaf yayin yadlikem. Woe to those who get up early in the morning to chase after beer, and who stay up late at night while being inflamed by wine. There harps and lyres and drums and flutes and wine at the parties, but they don't think about God. They don't think about God's works. And Maxi Vachor. So that is the, that is the, like, woe to these people who are drinking and singing. And Maxi Vachor, what does it say afterwards? Lachain Gola Miblidas. Therefore, my people will be exiled because of ignorance. Shagarmin Golas Alam. So that's the punishment number 1, exile. Uchavodo Meserav. Those who are the important people among them, the dignitaries, will die of starvation. Shemamin Rav Olam. That's the second punishment, is famine. Vahamonot Tzichet Sama. The crowds, the population will be thirsty. Here we don't interpret this as actual water, but Torah. Water is, in my Torah. Torah is compared to water. So that's the third thing, is that Torah will suffer. Vayishach adam vayishpal ish. People will be brought low. Shagarmin shiflus l'sono shel kadosh baruch hu. It'll cause the people haters of God, but it's a euphemism. It's like those who are close to God, who appreciate God, will be brought low. That's the 4th punishment. The inish shel kadosh baruch hu, and ish. How do we know that? Because Ish means God. Shem Hashem Ish Melchama. It said man. God is a man of war. And the fifth thing is the eyes of those who are haughty will be brought low. Shagarmin Shifu Shel Yisrael. They'll also cause the lowness of Israel. Maxi Bachrov, and then what's after that? Written after that, Lachain Harkiva Sheol Nafsha Upara Pia Levlichok V'Yorad Hadara V'Hamona Ushaona. The underworld will be hungry and open its mouth very wide, and the glory of Israel will sink into it with all of the people and whoever whoever is celebrating within her. So very bad things happen if you sing at parties. Misha Mesu Nevim Rishon. The Mishnah said once the early prophets passed, then the Urim Betumim stopped, and also what was the second thing? I'll get to in a second. Urim Betumim and the Shamir and Nofis. We didn't get to that yet, actually. Okay, so when the Nevi'im Rishonim died, there was no more Urim Betumim. Man Nevi'im Rishonim. Who are these early prophets? Amar Huna David Shmuel Shlomo. That's in the book of Shmuel and Malachim. The early prophets were David HaMelech, King David, and Shmuel and Shlomo. Rav Nachman Amar B'Yemei David Zimnin Salik Zimnin Lo Salik. Sometimes the Urim Betumim worked and sometimes not. In the days of King David. Sharei Shalt Tzadok V'Yosalot Tzadok HaKohen consulted the Urim Betumim for David and it worked. Shal Avyasar V'Lo Asalo, and Avyasar tried it and didn't work. Shemar Bayal Avyasar. The proof text is that Avyasar went up. We interpret that as he consulted the Urim Betumim, but it didn't work. Masir Rav Rashmo, Vayidli Duro Shalahim B'Yemei Zachayahu Hamevin Duro Elohim. He used to look or seek out God in the days of Zachayahu, who was someone who understood about seeing God. My love Urim Betumim. So, doesn't this mean this is in the days of Uzziah, who was one of the later kings, several generations after Shlomo? So doesn't this mean like this idea of one who understood how to see God wasn't at the Urim Betumim? So it looks like it was still working later on. Well, no, wasn't. That's not the case for Nevi'im. He wasn't consulting the Urim Betumim. He was consulting prophets. Tashma. Here's a proof. Mishachar Beis Hamikdash Rishon. When the first temple was destroyed, Batlu Ari Migrash. The open cities were done away with. The cities of the Levium. They were given, what was it, 40 or 60? 60 cities, I think, were given to the Levium to live in, because they didn't have agricultural land. So once the temple was destroyed, these cities were no longer. Pasku Urim Betumim and the Urim Betumim stopped. So you see where the question is going to be from that phrase, right? It sounds like that the Urim Betumim lasted through the whole period of the first temple. Didn't stop working after Shlomo. Anyway, the rest of the brisa goes to Pasak Melech mi Beis David. The house of David is no longer ruled. Adam Lomar Vayomer Hatirshasa Lahem Asher Yochlu Mikodesh Hakodeshim Alamot Kohen L'Urim Betumim. What about the verse in Ezra, which is much later? That's the Second Temple period. That there's a reference made to not eating the the sacrifices until the Kohen inquires of the Urim Tumim. And Marlo, what you answer about that is it means like, it doesn't mean like wait for the Urim Tumim to be consulted. It means like, we're going to do that when Mashiach comes. In other words, like far in the future, like we're not going to do it at all. And so it's not referring to, it's an expression, an idiom, rather than referring to the actual use of Urim Tumim. It's like something that no longer occurs. So anyway, the Brisa said that the Urim Tumim lasted until the end of the first temple, right? And did not stop after the days of Shlomo. So we're misunderstanding what is Nevi'im Rishonim. It doesn't mean David and Shlomo and Shmuel. It means It means the first prophets, meaning Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, and Yechazkel, but excluding Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, the last three prophets. Those are the Nevi'im Achronim. That's what the Gemara thinks now. The Tana Rabbanan, Mishamesu Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. When those three prophets died, Nistalka Ruach HaKodesh Yisrael. That's when the divine spirit stopped or left the people. In other words, they were the last Nevi'im, the last prophets. Even so, even though God didn't speak through prophets anymore, there was still this heavenly voice, which the Gemara sometimes refers to. One time, there was an assembly of rabbis in the house of Beis Guria in Jericho. They had a heavenly voice say to them, one of you is good enough for the Shekhinah to rest. But that person is worthy, but the rest of the generation is like, this isn't a good time. The rest of the people are not at that level that the Shekhinah wishes to come down to somebody. So who are they? Who is this one person they're thinking about? Must be Hillel the elder. Ukeshames, Hispidu, he Chasid, he Anav, Talmido Shel Ezra. Like when he died, his eulogy was, "Whoa, what a tzaddik he was, what a humble person he was. He was a student of Ezra." So, he was recognized as the one that the Shekhinah was worthy of rest there. He was worthy of having the Shekhinah rest on him. And there was another time, they were sitting around in Yavna. Their voice came from heaven. Same thing. So there's somebody here who's worthy of the Shekhinah, but the rest of you are no good, not good enough. So they all looked at Shmuel the younger. They said, "Oh, what a humble, what a tzaddik he was, the student of Hillel." Hillel was the one that first got this designation. And he said at the time that he died, Shimon v'Yishmael l'charba. Shimon and Yishmael will be executed by sword. The Chavroi Liktala and the rest of their colleagues will also be put to death. Ushar Amal Leviza and the rest of the country, rest of the people will be despoiled. The Akan Sagin Asidin Lemese Al Ama, and there are going to be terrible tragedies that are going to happen to the people. So, in other words, he foresaw what was going to happen. It was a form of kind of a form of prophecy. I want to say the same thing about Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. But so that didn't work out for Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava to be eulogized that way, because you don't do a full eulogy on someone who was executed by royal decree. Because you don't want to get the king angry, it's like you're protesting the king's or the government's decisions, so you're just tempting fate when you do that. The next statement in the Mishnah was, once the temple was restored, there was no more shamir. What is the shamir? Shamir shabo bana shlomo beis hamikdash. Shamir was this kind of worm that Shlomo built the first Beis Hamikdash with. Shanamar, Avaisi Bihi Banoso, Evan Shlema Masa Nivna. The temple was built with complete complete stones. It's they just found actual large boulders or rocks, and they use those to build it. So Rabbi says, "I want to can you really build a building out of rocks that stone that you don't cut?" It says elsewhere that these were all valuable stones that were smoothed with a file. Right. So which is it? Is it just rocks that you just found, or did you actually have to shape them? Or it says Im Kain, Matam Lomar Lanishma Vice Vihibano. So all right, so you want to say that they did use tools to shape the rocks, but it also says that you couldn't hear any metal tools working when they were building the temple. So what that means is, you didn't hear it in the temple. They would shape the stones elsewhere, and then they would bring them for use in the building. So that makes sense. Amar Rabbi Nirin Div Rabbi Huda B'Avnei Mikdash, Div Rabbi Chamia B'Avnei Beisa. What he thinks is that Rabbi Yehuda, who says that they used only complete stones, like unmodified stones, that makes sense about the temple, and about Shlomo's own palace, that they shaped the stones, but they did it elsewhere and then brought them to the building. So what is the shamir for if you actually use tools? You don't inscribe these stones. Now we're talking about the precious gems of the ephod and the choshen. You don't inscribe them with ink. They have to be engraved. The writing on them was engraved. But you can't use a tool either. It says they're in their fullness, right? So on one hand, you can't etch on them, and on the other hand, you can't write on them with ink. So how do you write on them? What you do is you write on them with ink, and then you use that as a train to train the shamir, this worm. So you kind of mark the stone like you see this all the time in road work, right? First they mark where the cuts are going to be made, and then they bring the saw or the jackhammer or whatever, and they do their work. So the same way, you mark it with ink, and then you bring the shamir to actually cut the stones, or they break by themselves, as it were. They break just like a date that in the summertime it kind of splits open. It's not missing anything. Like there's no residue left on any knife. More like the floor of a valley that cracks in the winter when it's rainy, but it's not missing any of its mass. Like when you dig, some of the dirt will adhere to the shovel, but there's no shovel being used here, so it's complete. Tanarabanan, rabbis taught Shamir Zeh Briyaso Kisora. It's like the size of a barley corn. It was created in the 6 days of creation. Nothing is too hard for it to cut. So then what do you keep it in? Right? Like what container can you keep it in if anything that you put it on will be broken? Karchin also bisfogin shel semer, you wrap it up in wool. Umanichin also beitni shel avor maleasume, and you put it in a lead tube filled with bran. So I guess if it's not on anything hard, then there's nothing for it to break. It only splits solid or things with hardness to them. But if it's wrapped up in a soft thing, then it will not penetrate through that soft material. Amar Rami, Mishahar b'mikdash rishon batla shira parnada u'zechuchus levana. Once the first temple was destroyed, this special kind of silk and white glass was no more. Mikdash rishon batla shira parnada u'zechuchus levana v'rachem barzal. Another brisa says once the temple is destroyed, the first temple, there was none of this special silk or white glass or iron chariots. And some say also this kind of congealed wine that comes from Snir, which is like these fig cakes, dried fig cakes. Okay, I think we will go a little further. Yeah, a little further. Nofes Sufim. Mishnah said, referred to the Shamir and the Nofes Sufim. What is that? Amarav, Solas Shasaf al Gabi Nafa. It's like fine flour that floats up on a sieve. It's like, this makes this amazing dough that tastes like it's got honey and oil in it. It's like this particularly special kind of flour. So Levi Amar, Shteki Karasani Bakos Batanur. It's 2 loaves of bread that are stuck to the wall of the oven. It's Tovchos, Ubos and Shamagil. They swell up and they come inward until they touch each other. So in other words, the dough didn't rise as well, or things didn't puff up as well in the oven once the temple was destroyed. Kind of on the same type of thing as the fruit lost its smell or its juiciness. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar said, when Nofes Sufim means honey that comes from from scenic places, from high mountains. My mashma, what does that mean? Kid the Matargum of Sheshes, Kama de Natzan de Bariasa. Like bees, they fly high up. The shaitan barumi alma, they fly like at great heights. Umasyan dusha me isbe tura, and they make their honey from vegetation that grows high up on the mountain. So this is considered like the highest quality honey. Lam Hasam, we have another Mishnah called Nitzok Tahor. Another Mishnah says, this is just tangentially related, anything liquid is poured from one vessel into another is tahor. In other words, if the pouring vessel is tahor, even if the poured vessel, the one that's poured into is tame, the tuma is not transmitted up the stream, as it were, except if it's zifim and sapichim honey. My zifim, what kind of honey is this? So that's the thicker, it's more viscous, so it's more like a solid. It's like almost like a solid connection to the pouring vessel. And what kind of honey is this? Zifim honey, or Yochanan Dvashim is zifimbo. Honey that's so thick, so congealed, you can even water it down and nobody will notice. It'll still taste like good honey. Shlakish Amar Shem Kamo. Shlakish says, why is it called Zif? Zifim, because it comes from Zif. Zif Vatelim Ubalas. These places are referred to as locations, and Zif is one of the places. So Dvash Zifim is honey from Zif. When Zifim came and said to Shaul, so it's a proper name, my Zifim. Who are the Zifim? Yochanan says liars, right? From Ziyuf, which is forgery. Rabbi Elazar Omer al Shem Akama. No, there are people that come from Zif. Zif Vatal Mubalah. So Zif is a place. And we will stop here, Pascal and Shayamana, and David will pick up here tomorrow.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day.